Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Out the Sharp End, a weekly business show where we talk about all things business, problems encountered by ourselves and by our clients. And on today's show, we're going to talk about what Steve Blank can teach you about innovation. And I'll just share a screen with you so that you can see what that's about. Here we go. So hopefully you can all see that now. So what Steve Blank can teach you about innovation, and brought to us today and presented by Movi, who are our new sponsors. More about that in the show. So what will you find out today? Today you'll discover about what it means to be persistent and why every entrepreneur needs to be persistent to be successful. Getting out of the office, finding out about your market position, your product and everything else, and not everything works. There's a big tendency to talk about failure, failing fast, failing early. We prefer to think of it in a slightly different way because failure has, at least in the UK, quite negative connotations. So we like to think of it as not everything works. You will test some things and you'll have to adapt. So you'll discover a little bit about that as well. And finally, a word to our sponsors. At the Sharp End is brought to you by Movi, the video messaging application that allows back and forth video message conversations that can be either public or private. Go to movi.co to see today's top posts. You can sign up for free, that's right, for free, and you can join in the conversation straight away. That's movi.co. So, on with the show. So today I've got Jon Stephenson, our Head of Business Insights, on the show. Welcome, Jon.
Good morning, Ian. Thank you for having me at the Sharp End episode 30, and I'm delighted to be the first guest on the show sponsored by Movi.
You're very welcome, Jon, and it's great to it's great to partner up with Movi. We've all been using Movi on our smartphones for sending video messages to one another. But let's crack on with the show, shall we? And let's talk about that first thing, which is persistence. So you know, as Head of Insights, when we start doing market testing and we start doing market research, what typically happens?
Well, the first thing to say is that any entrepreneur starting a business has got to learn one thing: persistence. What do I mean by that? Well, it's simple, Ian. When you're starting a business, you've got to understand that you need to find something that's scalable, something that's repeatable, and something that's profitable. And what is your business model? So in other words, that takes drive and it takes tenacity. Now, there are three stages that we speak to people who start a business, or when we speak to an entrepreneur, that hopefully they're able to transition through. So the first one is scalable startup, and then it's about transition, and then it's about the actual company. Now, all this takes persistence at each of the three stages. So when we first speak to people and we engage with them, that might be something as simple as between scale up and transition, step 1 and 2, you're looking there for the magic 3 words: product, market, fit. Secondly, you're looking for the business model that wraps around that. And thirdly, is it repeatable? Because it really does need to be repeatable. So that's product, market, fit, business model, and repeatable sales model to get you going.
Absolutely. So let's just dig into that a little bit. So when we're talking about business model, so that's the first stage generally, and we worked with a startup recently with a product idea, and as always, you're asked to pretty much go out and find who's going to take that to market for you, or you're looking for a specific type of deal. Will someone buy my idea? And that's pretty difficult to do, isn't it, Jon?
It is, absolutely. And the other thing as well is that I find is it needs money as well. You can't just pluck an idea out and think, right, okay, this is going to make me money, let's go. Life doesn't work like that. What we're really looking at is, so this particular startup, they're now at an interesting stage because they've attained product market fit. They know what their business model is. Fingers crossed it's a repeatable sales model. But off from that, the next step is now the really big challenge, Ian, because, is it going to be profitable? Are they going to break even with cash flow? Are they going to be able to scale up because they need to be able to scale up to make the next transition to achieve business growth.
And that's, that's great. And people coming into people starting to bring things to market find this out, and it's only the persistence where you get out and actually talk to different people, and you find out what the model that works for your product or service is. You really have to keep going to that, and persistence applies to the other two ticks. So getting out of the office is really crucial in being able to find the people to talk to that can help you protect your idea. It might be funders if you need finance to take your product to market, that can do the development of it. So it might be a product development, or it might be a electronics or software development. It might be whatever the service or product is. Finding those people takes a lot of effort and a lot of shoe leather typically to get out there and find out how your product, it might be the best idea in the world, but without some sponsorship of other people, it will be difficult to get there. And I think actually this is where some of the crowdfunding stuff starts to kick in, isn't it?
It can be, yes, it can be. There's another mindset as well, which is really, really important. And think of the bad pop group, ABBA. Where am I going with this?
You're going to talk about Dancing Queen, obviously.
Oh, well, naturally, my favourite tune. What I'm saying is always be adapting, and that's so important. So what do I mean by that? Your product market fit, you're simplifying your product, maybe, new technology trends, speak to your customers. It's crucial. Because what you think works and what actually works, what's your minimal viable product, what's your minimal functional set, what works for a web user if it's a web-orientated business is going to be different from what's up here in the business founder's head or the entrepreneur starting the business.
Well, and it's really interesting, isn't it? Because you talk about that, and there's a lot of talk in the lean startup. Sorry about the earthquake there, that was me. There's a lot of talk in the lean startup camps about pivoting.
Yeah.
And pivoting is related to going out and talking to the market and then changing your ideas and being adaptable. Unfortunately, like failure, it gets misinterpreted. So you only pivot if the market majority is really saying, well, you've kind of got the right thing, but it needs to be over here. If you just do this, it'll sell a bunch. And if you take every single conversation, so every single comment, and you go, I'm going to pivot because that guy told me this, I'm going to pivot because she said that, then really you're making your journey very, very difficult. You need to aggregate that information. You do need to get out and talk to people, but you have to aggregate that information, use some intelligence about it until you've got enough data that says, actually, you're heading here, you really ought to head just over here, and you can increase your chances of success. And that's where the market insight stuff comes in again, isn't it, John?
It is, yeah.
To aggregate that data and be smart about it.
Yeah, so on to the second tick, which is not everything works. Well, it doesn't. But it's so important to get out of the building and become part of the customer development process. So effectively, Steve Blank has cobbled together a wonderful book, the Startup Business Manual, which will pop in the show notes, which is super. But that gives you a structured methodology to walk through, which is a 4-step process. I've just put 2 fingers up there. There we go, that's 4 steps.
Awesome.
Anyway, customer discovery, customer validation. That's about finding a repeatable, scalable business model, steps 1 and 2. Steps 3 and 4, customer creation and company building. That's about executing your business model. So what we're saying is in steps 1 and 2 is customer discovery. That's the business founder or the entrepreneur. You've got this wonderful idea for a business, but ultimately, this is what we keep preaching to people. It's a bunch of hypotheses. Get out there, speak to your customers, understand.
Well, there's a key word there, John, isn't there? So when it's hypotheses like that, it's very much akin to the scientific method where you build a hypothesis and then the real validation of it is to test it.
Yeah, so
getting out of the office
Yeah,
is about. It's about testing it.
testing the assumptions, and hopefully turning your assumptions into facts. Um, then the latter two bits are about customer creation and customer building. Customer creation is all about end user demand, or making sure it's scalable, and customer building is about the journey and the startup and the business getting traction in the marketplace. But you can't do any of this if you don't speak to customers, because you
No,
can't
absolutely right.
validate anything.
Absolutely right. Um, and you've got to be prepared for a lot of pushback. So whether you're going out to raise finance, or whether you're going out to find a route to market, or whether you're going out to test the market to see what your product should look like, not everything works, right? So you've got to test a lot. You've got to
Yeah,
find these things out and then aggregate your data and figure out where your business is going.
I think
Be flexible is
I,
the
yeah, I agree. I agree. I think it distills to three simple questions. I'll get my fingers right.
three.
Okay, who is the customer? Number one. What is their problem? And what are the possible solutions that you're trying to help fix with the product or with the service that you're putting forward? Speak to your customers. They'll help shape your hypotheses and turn them into facts. Listen to what they're saying and take a step back and think, okay, what does this mean for my business? And remember, Ian, that it's all about finding a scalable, repeatable, profitable model. That's the
Absolutely
key
right, John.
thing. The key thing in all of this. Oops.
So the great thing there is those three takeaways tie in really tightly together. So the persistence, getting out of the office, and not everything works, or fail fast, fail early, as people seem to like to call it. But not everything works. If you're flexible and you use those three elements, there's a very good chance by listening and talking to the right people that you'll be able to increase the chance of success of your business. So
Yeah.
let's just wrap up, John,
Yeah.
by talking a little bit about Steve Blank himself, because we've not really talked about him, and yet we've got a show about him, right? So Steve's a serial entrepreneur. He's been involved in several businesses. When you read about him, he says, two were okay, two bombed, one was an outrageous success, and one was mediocre.
Yeah.
He's got a couple of books out. John's referred to one already, which is the Startup Manual, which was really the inspiration for the lean startup movement,
Yeah.
which is also a big thing in the US. And the other book was The 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And Epiphany was one of Steve's companies, right? So it's the one that was the outrageous success. We'll put links in the show notes to all of these. We'll also put a link in the show notes to Steve's blog, because that's a very readable blog, and he's now, although he's retired, he's not really retired because he's an entrepreneur, so entrepreneurs rarely retire. He seems to be traveling the world, he's sharing his experiences, and he's got involved in the lean startup movement around Stanford and around the whole ICOR model in the US and the lean startup movement. So now they're actively attracting companies to Stanford, putting them through a program. Steve and some other entrepreneurs are leading that, and they're doing great things and helping companies get funding, find the right market fit, and overall reduce the risk. And that's what a lot of this is about. It's reduce the risk for the entrepreneur, reduce the risk for all the people funding it and involved in it, and reduce the risk of having a failed business. Because when we talk about failure, we mean total failure, failed business. We don't mean about, well, we started off at one point and thinking we'd end up over here and we ended up a little bit away from that. If it's still an outrageous success for us, that's a good outcome. So reducing the risk. Anything you want to add to that, John, as a wrap up?
Yeah. As a wrap up, I'd just like to say we read a lot of business books. We read one business book a month. We're slow readers. We just read each line with a finger like that. No, but seriously, Steve Blank, when I read him for the first time, it made sense. It seemed logical. And his mindset and his input and his thoughts, and the fact that he distills it down to a methodology that's all built around the customer development process, about customer discovery, customer validation, customer creation, company building. Really just sits well for any entrepreneur to follow. But the main thing that I take away from a consulting perspective is that we have many clients. We have startup clients and we have existing companies. And really there's a big line you can draw underneath a startup and an existing customer in terms of how we sell to them, and we work with them in two different ways, which is all based around Steve Blonkin. And that's about Steve preaches one simple thing, and that simple thing is that a startup is a temporary organization. Get that? Temporary organization. What it's all about is a startup is in search of a scalable, a repeatable and profitable business model. Whereas our other clients that we work with, existing businesses, know how to execute their business model. They understand the customer problems and their product and service is known, and what they come to us for is business growth advice about how to enter a new market or adapt their product portfolio, if that's a product, or a service. And
yeah, that's right.
The two big differences there mean that we get across and we offer different services.
Yeah, absolutely right, John. So thanks a lot for that. Just a quick plug. I'm just going to share another screen, and this is Haroon's Hangout, also presented by our new sponsors, Movi. You can find Haroon's Hangout on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. GMT with the internationally featured, our head of digital marketing, Haroon Rashid. So, without further ado, we're pretty much at the end of the show. Thanks a lot for tuning in. We're on every week. This is episode 30. We hope you're enjoying it. If you've got any questions that you want to ask us in an open forum, you can contact us on Twitter, via our blog, via email, or on Google+, and we'd be happy to air those questions on the show and answer them live. So that's the end of it for today. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Hope you found it useful, and thanks, John, for being on the show.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye all. Bye.